The left has completely lost its mind, folks. They have been deflecting, lying through their teeth, and pointing fingers at literally anybody who will stand in front of them to try to justify why they had such a catastrophic loss in this last election, blaming white women, blaming black men for not having enough fidelity to the Democrat Party. Now, all this has not come without controversy, because alongside this, there have been allegations that a FEMA worker had been instructing other FEMA workers who were assisting people who had been hit by Hurricane Milton down in Florida to skip homes that had Trump flags outside of them. And this isn't really that much of a surprise for anybody who's been following politics for the last few years. This is exactly par for the course. Anyway, the FEMA worker, Marnie Washington, ended up doing an interview with Roland Martin, and this is what she had to say.
FEMA says they fired me, but I still have access to the systems and their applications. And while I was in an interview yesterday, I noticed that my files were being deleted in my name, and I could not have been doing that while I was talking to Madison. So FEMA is very well aware of the incidents that take place, not just with my crew, but with all of the crews in the state that's declared. And instead of just saying, hey, this is how we're going to mitigate it to protect our people, they decided to fire me and make sure Donald Trump knows that they are loyal to him because they fear retribution. The important thing is here, once we start seeing a trend, for example, if they just so happen to have these Trump campaign signs in front of their home, and that's the characteristic that's coming along with that, we have to proceed with precaution. So avoidance first and then de-escalation.
So what you heard there is essentially the FEMA worker, Marnie Washington, confirming what many people had suspected, that she wasn't just a rogue agent within FEMA going out of her way to try to get FEMA workers to ignore Trump supporters. No, this is actually a system-wide issue within FEMA, as many people had suspected. This is a top-down problem, and this is a very big problem. As I spoke about this a couple of days ago, this goes back to the whole deep state issue. The managerial class, these unelected bureaucrats who are basically making decisions on how to spend your tax money and spend your government resources that are made for you, even in a time of crisis. They are advising that people discriminate against you. There's absolutely nothing more un-American than doing something like that. Hell, it's not even un-American. It's inhuman. How could you, after somebody gets hit by a massive weather phenomena that literally wipes out a Category 3 hurricane, folks? I don't think I have to describe to many of you just how serious that is. I've lived through a Category 1. That was wild. I can't imagine living through a Category 3, having your house torn down, and then the FEMA worker coming by and just seeing, oh, Trump flag. Let's just keep walking. Let's not even give this person a chance to find out what kind of resources that they can have access to, that their government can provide them to help them, just because we don't agree with their political opinion. Anyway, she goes on to say later on that this also happened in North Carolina. If you'll remember, North Carolina was also hit with a natural disaster just maybe a month before Florida was hit with 2 hurricanes back to back. It is unfathomable, the level of corruption within our government. And I think that it's great that this is happening right now. Not that it's great that any of this is happening because it's awful, but I think the timing is perfect, because there's never been a better time for there to be just a complete cleansing of our government, because there are way too many people sitting in their federal bureaucrat chair just enjoying the fat of the land and not giving Americans the services that they're essentially paying for. Get all these people out on the double. Pronto. Don't wait. I am so excited to see how they're going to clean house. It has to be immediate. We're going to get to this later on, but some of the appointments that Trump has been announcing just give me so much hope that they are effectively going to bring down government to the smallest size likely since Reagan. It's possible. Anyway, speaking of wasting government resources, no other place other than New York has greater experience in this. They've been basically maintaining a large illegal immigrant population of above 200,000 people, paying for hotel stays, giving them free food cards after trying to feed them, and the illegal immigrants getting offended that they didn't like the meals that they were being served. Can you imagine, folks? You're here illegally. You're already being given a hotel room. You don't like the food, you complain about it, and then they give you a cash card with $1,400 a month. I mean, talk about having it made in this country. You just skip ahead everybody who has been busting their ass to get here and stay here legally, and you get everything handed to you. I mean, the mayor of New York recently had this to say.
Will you express concern about mass deportations in the city?
My concern is one concern, and we keep tinkering around the edges. We keep having this philosophical conversation about it. The voters communicated loudly and clearly. We have a broken immigration system. It needs to be fixed. That's the only conversation I want. It's broken. It needs to be fixed. And New York City was devastated by that broken system. 220,000 migrants and asylum seekers have made their way here. No financial assistance from the administration. I think it was about $200 and something million with billions of dollars we had to pay for. I don't want to see that happen again. I don't want what's taking place in Chicago and Denver, Los Angeles, Houston. I don't want to see it take place again. Let's fix our immigration system. Anything other than that, I'm not interested in that conversation. We have a broken system. I talked about this in 2022, just as I talked about violence in 2021, and voters made this the top of their list. The top of their list. When I was talking about it, everyone was being dismissive of me, and voters said, this is a problem. And if we don't have a conversation about fixing the system, everything else is just being philosophical and theoretical, and I'm just not going to engage in that. Let's fix the system.
There's no more time for this globalist, Marxist virtue signaling that even that journalist was pandering to. He's like, are you going to cooperate with President Trump? Because you shouldn't. You're mayor of New York City, Mr. Eric Adams. You should be ultra-liberal. This whole neoliberalism approach to immigration is what got this country where we're at. And I am so happy to see cities like New York, which are relatively liberal, take the initiative to say, yes, I'm going to work with President Trump. And honestly, this would make things so easy. You got all of them in a hotel. Just send in the federal agents one by one. Just boom, boom. You would clear out an entire building. New York has 200,000 people. They don't know what to do with it. That's it. Just do it. That's why people voted for Trump. Get all of them the hell out of here. I mean, this is a problem that's gotten so out of hand for New York that at one point they were literally having kids not come to school so that they could house illegal immigrants in the school. They were using school buses to drive the immigrants to the schools and then housing them in the schools. I mean, what kind of upside down priorities do we have where you're literally compromising your future so you can have these people who I'm sure they're all very nice. Not all of them. There are a lot of criminals in the middle there, but a lot of them just want to have a better life. And sure, this is a great place to have a life. Just come here legally. That's the point. But imagine this. You are literally compromising, training the future citizens of this country so that you can accommodate people who don't speak the language. You don't know what level of training they have. The vast majority of them are likely going to take low-paying, low-skilled jobs. So basically, in the neoliberal logic that justifies open borders and mass migration, you're essentially choosing to sacrifice the education of your future citizens in exchange for a brand new electorate, because let's be real, that's what it is, of low-skilled workers that are likely going to take low-paying jobs. And what are you doing in turn? You're in turn having your own population turned into low-skilled, low-wage workers. I mean, it's a lose-lose-lose, regardless of the angle you look at it. It takes at least 1 to 2 generations for people to actually have some sort of financial stability when they migrate to America. You know, maybe your daughter, after you move here, ends up going to college and then buys a house, but it's, you know, the American dream isn't something that happens overnight. Unless you're Tony Montana and you're out here selling coke, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a generational thing. The result of this policy harkens back to a mantra that I've seen all over Twitter, and it's been truer than ever. You import the third world, you become the third world. And trust me, I grew up in the third world. I know what the third world looks like, and I walk around Los Angeles, and very often I'm like, why did I come here? Why did I move to this first world country, this developed industrial country, when it's literally turning into Brazil. The irony. Anyway, Democrats are obviously still in denial about losing the election. They're trying to rewrite history, and it's never been more apparent than when they try to spit out some forced talking points about how effectively they were able to manage this crisis over the last few years.
Where do you see Democrats deciding to push back? Would it be on the entire agenda, or will it just be on parts of it?
What I would say is that Joe Biden showed that you can have a sensible immigration policy where border crossings are, it's really important to remember, border crossings were lower during the Biden administration than they were during the Trump administration. We just didn't put forth policies like family separation that were designed to be cruel. That is what Donald Trump is showing, not just by endorsing a policy of mass deportations, but making Stephen Miller and Tom Homan some of the first people that he actually announced.
That's lies, straight up lies, up and down. I think most Americans are already educated about how much of a lie literally everything she just said is. Democrats had their border policy has been basically open borders. They've allowed over 10 million people, some people even say 20 million undocumented immigrants to come into the country, okay? Because that 10 to 12 million number is for people that had contact with border agents. We don't know how many people made it through. There's about 500,000 criminals alone that have entered the country. Now, beyond that, the whole policy of family separation was created by who, you ask? Barack Obama. Yes. And he was one of the strictest enforcers of that policy. And all Trump did was say, hey, guess what? We're going to keep doing it. And what did the media do? They pretended like Trump came up with that policy, when in fact it was an Obama policy. He acted on it a lot. He also deported a lot of people, and it's just crazy. These kinds of policies only become controversial when it's Trump trying to implement them. But also, I think it's great that Democrats are taking the path of not only being an opposition party, but clearly presenting themselves as opposing the policies that Americans have largely voted for. A lot of people came into the voting booth and voted to strengthen the border. That was, I think, the second or the third issue, if I remember correctly, on exit polls of why people chose to vote. And it's amazing to me that Democrats are taking this route, especially after they literally had this bumbling idiot of a candidate that's Kamala Harris, who has always been pro-open borders and has even talked about giving transgender surgeries to illegal immigrants and prisoners. And she literally flip-flopped. That was one of the biggest issues that affected her credibility. She flip-flopped on the border, at one point even citing policies that were Trump's policies about building the border wall. It's insane to me just how quickly and how easily the Democrats can flip-flop between their positions. They're clearly a party that's more interested in withholding power instead of standing by the principles that they actually believe in, which, look, I may not agree with your policies and your principles, but there's something, to me at least, that if you do stand with your principles and you go down with the ship instead of trying to pander and acquiesce to what you think is popular right now so you can win an election and then do the complete opposite, there's something to say about that authenticity. It maintains your reputation in the eyes of the American people, and all the Democrats have been doing so far is just tank their reputation. I don't believe a single word that ever comes out of the mouth of a Democrat, because they are demagogues, they're liars, and they don't stand for anything. And if they do, they only stand for it long enough until it wins or loses them an election. Because as soon as they get the opportunity, they turn around and hand everything over to the globalists.
So, look, I think that you can find, Democrats could find common ground with Republicans in terms of policies that would actually crack down on, illegal border crossings. But what they're not going to do is endorse policies that, again, are only meant to sort of, to instill fear, to say that we're going to deport legal immigrants as well as illegal immigrants if they're part of the same family. They're not going to play into that fear mongering. So the second that it sort of gets to that, I think you're going to see real Democratic opposition.
Well, that's not even something that's on the table. Nobody is talking about deporting legal immigrants. It is illegal immigrants or people who have broken the law to be here. And the whole point is that you committed a crime to get here. I'm going to assume that her statement is in reference to an interview that Tom Homan did a few weeks ago with 60 Minutes, where he was asked about family separation and how could you send out some family members while others are left behind. And he responded saying, well, you can deport a whole family. Clearly, he's not talking about legal immigrants. Again, the problem that most Americans have with immigrants is if they're here illegally. We just don't want people breaking the law to get into the country. That's it. And we want a decent system where if people do want to come into the country, they're vetted so that we don't get criminals coming in through the border and then doing awful things like the litany of crimes that we've seen happen over the last few months by the hands of criminals. I don't want to see children being murdered by a guy who came up from fucking Ecuador or wherever the fuck he came from, who has multiple charges to his name, and it came up because they're emptying their prisons out there. We need a system. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
I will say that the border crossings went down only at the end of the Biden administration when he implemented the executive order after the bipartisan plan failed because Donald Trump by and large spiked it. But I saw you nodding.
Because Donald Trump.
Correct. Yeah, I think we have to be clear. I mean, even this September, border crossings were up 112%. There's been 10 to 15 million people who have come into this country illegally. We saw recent ICE reporting data that showed in the last decade, let's be fair, in the last decade, there's been 14,000 illegal immigrants who have come into this country who have committed and been convicted of murder, 24,000 committed and convicted of sexual assault and rape. Those are people who they're going to target first, those and people who are national security threats. So again, I want to be very clear. No one is talking about deporting legal immigrants. That is absolutely not true. We're talking about...
Except for Tom Homan, who will actually be in charge of that policy. I'm sorry, lots of people are talking about it because of that interview that he gave with 60 Minutes. Yes, in fact, it is unconstitutional, and that's exactly what they're supporting.
It is absolutely infuriating how Democrats will lie to you with a smile on their face. They'll get fact-checked to oblivion, get completely destroyed, point by point, educated on every single one of their lies, and then they'll just turn around and say, nope, that's not what it is. I believe it's the opposite. Never at any point has anybody ever heard Tom Homan ever talk about deporting legal immigrants. In fact, that clip of his congressional testimony where he's confronting and being confronted by AOC, and he just absolutely tears her apart. He talks specifically about, hey, if you want to be an asylum seeker, you come into the country legally, just how the Attorney General said they have to come in. He doesn't have a problem with legal immigrants. It's the illegals. That is the point. But obviously, Democrats just want to sit here and obfuscate. They want to just get one thing, take it out of context, and blow it out as though it's something else. Because that's how they get to do their fear-mongering. Outside of that, they just end up being the highly ineffective, unpopular, and just a party that just doesn't align with American values anymore. Anyway, like I said, Democrats are not handling well the loss that they had. They are coping, they're seething, they're just having struggle sessions. They're wringing their fists and just screaming into the wind like old man yells at cloud. That old Abe Simpson meme. Anyway, one of the folks that we looked at this past week who was clearly on the Kamala Harris payroll because at first he was critical of her and then he ended up switching sides and calling Trump a fascist. Well, Charlamagne the God has been having a lot of thoughts about what it means for Trump to be president and the people who supported him.
Caitlyn wants to put his right foot in, take his right foot out, put his left foot in, take her left foot out, pee at a urinary stall and shake it all about. But that is not how any of this should work. But you know what? At the end of the day, Caitlyn, you can change the top layer, but you was who you was before you got here. And what you are is a rich white male. And that's why I keep saying him when I shouldn't be. But I can't stop seeing Caitlyn as a rich white male. And that identity, pun intended, trumps all. Please let Chelsea Handler give Caitlyn Jenner the biggest hee-haw.
Hee-haw, hee-haw. That is way too much Dan mayonnaise.
He's just a rich white man.
That is so crazy.
And everybody need to cut it out.
Now,
okay?
When you say it, it's fine. As soon as Jess said, off with her head. Period.
All I'm simply saying
is... But he's a rich white woman.
No, he's a rich white man, and he acts like one.
Wow, it's amazing how all the wokeism just completely left the building as soon as they lost. By the way, the whole thing with Charlamagne disagreeing with Kamala was based on Kamala's former proposed policy of giving inmates and illegal immigrants transgender surgeries. That was a clip of Charlamagne criticizing that. that Trump ended up using in an ad. And then later, I imagine that it prompted Kamala to bring in Charlamagne to try to get some of that black vote that she ended up losing. Anyway, Charlamagne made some points. I think that the pendulum's about to swing. I think that a lot of people who have been virtue signaling on this whole, trans BS, live your life. I'm socially liberal. Live your life. Do whatever the hell you want. I don't give a fuck. Stay away from children, and I'm not going to pretend you're something that you're not. That's it. I will call you whatever pronoun you want to be called. That's it. But in my head, that's what it is. I'm not going to fucking lie. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, bro, you're a 65-year-old white dude and you're wearing heels. All of a sudden you're a woman. Nah, it's not going to happen. Anyway, liberals aren't just melting down on their radio shows. They're also melting down all over TikTok. And wow, it's been pretty funny to watch.
Absolutely nobody is going to convince me that Donald Trump didn't steal this election, because he 100% did. You're telling me that Elon Musk, this super rich Uber guy who happens to be BFFs with fucking Trump, who also owns Starlink, the computer equipment that's going to count votes. You got a rich, corrupt fucking BFF of this tyrant using his equipment to count votes. Are you kidding me? How stupid do they think people are? I swear to fuck, if Democrats are being too prideful to call this shit out, this is just fucked. American Democrats are fucking pushovers, and it's gonna cost millions of lives.
Jesus, the levels of stupidity are just absolutely amazing. It's not going to cost any sort of lives. Also, it's amazing to me how all of a sudden, all the liberals have turned out to be conspiracy theorists. Remember the last election in 2020 where a whole hell of a lot of people were like, hey, it's kind of suspicious. Joe Biden got 10 million more votes than any Democrat in the last 6 election cycles. How did that happen? And, it led to a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of people having their suspicions, including their current president-elect, and to a point where, you couldn't even question the election results. It got to a point where Donald Trump questioned the election results on the Nelk podcast, and that podcast got nuked, okay? Now, all of a sudden, the shoe's on the other foot. And guess what? Nobody's going to do anything about it because liberals can get away with this kind of stuff. They can get away with saying whatever the hell they want, speculating. And this is the only person. I know we just watched one video. You can find a whole wormhole of conspiracy theories of liberals talking about all the ways that Donald Trump stole the election. The reality of the situation is Donald Trump got basically the same amount of votes that he got in the last election, up by maybe 200,000 or 300,000 votes. He got 71,800,000. Kamala Harris ended up getting, I think, 67 million perhaps. I don't remember the figure off the top, but she lost. That's the point. Anyway, Joe Biden, on the other hand, got 81 million votes. How do you account for that 10 million vote spread? I don't know. A lot of people say that it was the ballot harvesting. It was the Democrats changing the rules in the elections, knowing that so many people were going to be at home and setting it up so that they could have their representatives just go home to home and have people vote in front of them and collect those votes so that they could do that. They could get all these mass mobilization of votes. Regardless of what happened, something's very fishy about the 2020 election, genuinely. And that's a statistical analysis of it. With the 2024 election, it was just basically 2016 all over again. In fact, Kamala Harris had pretty much down to the T the exact same performance that Hillary Clinton had in 2016. Anyway, another trend that's happening over with the libs is that they are encouraging each other to just cut off family members and friends and people who disagree with them politically, because clearly the healthiest way to deal with a difference of political opinion is to just act like a toddler and just scram.
I'm going to make this for the white people and the white people only. Oh, y'all are standing on big business, and I love to see it. Y'all are cutting off family members. You are standing up for black people in these comments. Y'all are stitching videos and going in, and we love to see it. This is how you ally. You hold the people accountable for their actions, your people, because our group, we understood the assignment. We showed up and we saw the assignment through. We did our jobs, right? Now y'all are saying bet. All y'all getting in the comments, and a few of you have been in my comments saying, hey, you rest, we'll take it from here. Oh, and y'all are taking it. And I love to see it. We're still not helping though. I just want that to be clear. No, that it's not going to make us come out of retirement, but I'm enjoying watching it. I'm enjoying watching you all take the accountability and say, hey, I hear you, I get it. I'm not going to just say I hear you and get it. I'm actually going to go put some action behind my words. And I love that for you. Keep that up. That's how you start. That's how you start. Again, we're not in retirement. And take those damn bracelets off.
That bracelet comment is in reference to all the white women who are making blue bracelets so they can identify each other in public as to who voted for Kamala. If it wasn't apparent enough that somebody's a lib because they've shaved their heads and wear masks everywhere in 2024, 2.5 years after the pandemic ended. Look, I don't understand why everything has to be turned racial still to this day. There were a lot of black men and black women who voted for Trump. Obviously not as many black women who voted for Kamala, but he made huge gains, especially with black men. Latino men, Latino women, also huge gains. And I think it goes without saying that this whole intersectional point of view that Democrats have with the world of like, you have to prove to us that you are worthy of our approval. Us at the top of the pyramid, the most oppressed group. When in fact, this chick is more light-skinned than 99% of the people that you meet in other countries. In fact, she could pass as white if she removed those braids. To have your entire politics rely on your racial identification is a recipe for disaster. It's exactly why the Democrats lost. It's exactly why they're going to keep losing, because at the end of the day, most people who step into the voting booth aren't looking at race, gender, or whatever you used to identify yourself as. They're looking at their pocketbooks. They're looking at the economy. Am I doing better than I was in that last election? And will the candidate that I'm about to choose going to actually do something about it? Do they have policies that represent me and my family and are going to help us make more money? Needless to say, as always, like people end up trying to subvert that and guilt trip other people, like making them feel like they're not good enough because they don't have the approval of a certain group of people, to try to just basically emotionally manipulate them into voting for whoever their candidate is. And in this case, thank God, even though the emotional manipulation was out there, especially for white women, it didn't work. Because Kamala Harris, I think, one of the few things that most people in this country can agree on, even people who voted for her and only voted for her because they were trying to vote against Trump, is that she was genuinely an awful candidate. America would be lost. This country would be over if she had won within 2 years. I mean, this is the same person who received an intelligence report and started getting upset at the intelligence official who gave her the report that they were using gendered language in the report. Folks, let's say this is a report about a potential terrorist attack. Is that how you want your president to read the report? To get upset about the language rather than the threat level to you or other Americans? I think that question pretty much answers itself. You can't woke yourself out of this one. Anyway, Trump's appointments so far have been absolutely great. J.D. Vance is his vice president. I love that dude. Marco Rubio was recently selected as Secretary of State. He has a very harsh line, pro-Israel line, which, you know, I don't want the wars to keep going on, but I'm also pro completely annihilating Hamas from the map, and he's very, very motivated to do that. And you know, I kind of fuck with him for that. The Secretary of Defense is Pete Hegseth. He's a Fox host. I like Pete. I don't know much about his experience, but I like Pete. I've been watching Fox and Friends for a minute, and I've watched a couple of clips of him talking about his perspective on foreign policy, and he seems like a smart dude. Obviously, I'm not as familiar with him, but you know, that specific appointment threw people for a loop. Libs were completely losing their fucking minds all day, all over Twitter, joking about that appointment because they think it's ridiculous that a person who works in television should be appointed for any sort of government position. Needless to say that it doesn't matter what your background is. If you're qualified for the job, you're just qualified for the job. I'm sure we could go down Biden's entire list of appointees, starting with the vice president, and see that it's all kooks and lunatics and dumbasses. Anyway, a couple of other standouts: National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik, Lee Zeldin for EPA Administrator, Mike Huckabee for Israel Ambassador, The border czar, Tom Homan, my dude. I am so happy. And there are so many others. Stephen Miller's coming back. But by far, the biggest headline out of all the appointments is the DOGE department, the Department of Government Efficiency. And that's Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, I have lots of hopes for that. I think that there's potential for them to do a terrific job. Vivek, one of the smartest, politically minded entrepreneurs in the country. At one point, I was hoping that he would get the VP nomination. He ended up still in the administration, but such a terrific public speaker, such a profound understanding of how the government works and all the inefficiencies in it. And he's the one who coined that term for the deep state, which I like to use instead of the deep state, because deep state often just sounds so conspiratorial. He calls it the managerial class. And it is such a terrific description for these unelected officials that end up having so much undue power and negatively affecting the lives of Americans without actually ever being elected into these positions of power within government. So, yeah, and needless to say, Elon Musk also, terrific choice. They were... Over the last couple of weeks, Elon was going back and forth with Ron Paul, who's a libertarian. Ron Paul has always had the idea of abolishing the Fed, abolishing the IRS, if I remember this correctly. And I'm all for that. I think that the Fed does not represent the interests of the American people. I think that the IRS has way too much power, and it would be great if we broke up those two agencies. I don't know if it's completely possible to undo with all of them. They are so entrenched into our economy, especially the Federal Reserve, which isn't even a federal body. Trump is also trying to get rid of the chair of the Fed, and he said he's not going to step down. I want to see how that fight's going to play out, because I'm not happy with the way like many Americans, I'm not happy with the way our economy is right now. And you got to start at the top. Just start axing people. I've heard rumors that they're likely, in order to reduce the size of the government, going to move some of these agencies outside of D.C. They're just going to break them up. And music to my ears. Move this all over the country. Break these institutions up. These people are way too comfortable being bureaucrats. And their influence it's so much from the left. There's no balance to the way these people think. And you see it just by the electoral map, because the only reason why Virginia, which is a largely red state, ends up going blue is because there is such a huge population of government employees who live in Fairfax, and they all vote blue. So they end up flipping the state of Virginia into a Democrat state purely because they're so blue. So yeah, get rid of all these people. They all suck. They don't work for us. We didn't elect them, so get them out of here. Anyway, not everybody agrees with all these appointments. They don't think this is going to be great. One of them, who's crying, has been crying, and will continue to cry for the next 4 years, is obviously Joy Reid.
The former and future president is moving quickly to fill the clown car and round out his cabinet before he changes his mind and fires them all. Moments ago, Trump announced that he has selected Fox Weekend morning show host, you can't make this up, Pete Hegseth, to serve as Secretary of Defense, because why not?
Yes, I'm sure it's a clown car. Not that Joe Biden's cabinet wasn't a clown car, right? Because that was very serious, leading with Kamala Harris. And I don't even have to go down the list of people that are just absolute clowns that were on their side. The level of cynicism coming from Joy Reid as far as the appointments, I mean, it's expected. This is MSNBC. They have absolutely no commitment to the news. That's why the mainstream media is completely losing their footing with the American people. As far as I've seen, MSNBC's ratings are down in the tubes. They're scrambling to try to get people to watch because they don't have public trust, and people who are traditionally Democrats and were lied to about the election by people on MSNBC saying that they were going to win, that Kamala was going to take Iowa, and the election results were not going to be even close, and people don't trust them anymore. And the trust level has been affecting them so much that CNN is wiping house. I think they're firing like 80% of the people who work there. Whatever is happening over there, I hope it turns out for the better for them, because their days are numbered. This kind of media is the future. It's here. It really is. And there's no greater sign than both presidential candidates in this last election cycle going on multiple podcasts instead of just making their campaigns based on cable news and traditional media. I think it says a lot about the state of legacy media, the trust that Americans put in it, and how people are preferring to look for alternative sources of news so that they can be informed. That feels less like they're having propaganda shoved down their gullet, which is often how you feel like watching MSNBC. At least in platforms like mine, you know what our biases are, and you end up getting to just have a conversation and hear a point of view that either you agree with or disagree with. And that's pretty much it. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.